All right, we are live. Hello, everybody. It's Keeping Karlsson number 335. Thanks for joining the live show.
You're welcome.
No, I didn't mean you. I meant the people listening.
Oh, yeah. Thanks, Josh. Reliable ego boost at the start of each episode. Matthew, Shams, Kevin. Nice to see you guys. It's somebody. We have such I know these people. I love them. I'm so happy to see them.
That's nice. What do you love about them? No, I'm just kidding. We don't have time for this. But yeah, thanks so much for everyone joining.
I actually would answer too. That's why you cut me off before I could
exactly. I realized
it'd be like a 10-minute pre-show speech that would end for in a call for world peace.
Probably
banding together to fight climate change.
Telling me to recycle more or something.
Hey, Sir Fonty.
So and then obviously there's also people watching live or not live, but watching on YouTube. Obviously, we appreciate if anyone wouldn't mind, anyone who's watching the YouTube video, if you could also subscribe to the podcast, give us an audio download on Spotify or wherever, just because that's how we get actually judged by our overlords, Blue Wire, on how we're doing. Got contract year here, people. But okay, I think we've got a fun show for everyone. So yeah, I'm excited. Brian, are you ready to start the recording? Okay, he's just
about done chewing. Yeah, I'm ready.
I was talking to Brian before how he has this miraculous life where somehow no matter what time we record the show, he's always eating right before, because we do Patreon at 8 instead of 7:45, and he's still eating.
It's a testament to how much time I spend, researching.
Oh, right. Were you researching right up to the?
I prioritize the researching over the eating.
I see.
And then I prioritize the eating over the recording. So I'm not sure, overall, if that's a net gain or not.
So really, the benefit goes to the people reading the show notes.
Yes, exactly. Our patrons.
Yeah. Okay.
They deserve it.
So why do I even record and edit the show? We can just write up these notes and then people can read it at their leisure.
I think you're onto something.
We can get some, AI, or not even an AI, just whatever, like text to speech to read this out to people if they want. Save a lot of time.
Yeah.
See you, everyone.
Okay, bye.
JK!
Oh my God. That was so funny.
Psych, just kidding. Okay. I'm ready to start the recording, Brian, if you are.
How do you like my camera angle this week?
It's good.
Thanks.
All right, so you ready to start recording?
You didn't even look. I'm ready.
Okay, 3, 2, 1, record.
Recording.
Okay, one more thing here. Record on this computer. Guys, I have so many backups. There's no way this is getting lost.
Backups.
John Newhold complimented me for all my backups, which, by the way, we needed last week when we did the 3 tracks. Zoom can't handle doing a 3-person call and then recording all 3 tracks locally. The Jeremy track just had a big chunk cut out. It's okay, thanks, I guess. So then I couldn't even edit out the tracks individually like I normally do. So there was typing at some parts while people were talking. I couldn't even edit it out. I wonder if anyone noticed. No one said anything. So I don't know what that means. Why am I spending so much time editing all this stuff out when no one even notices when there's typing? But okay. Anyway, I guess the people watching on YouTube don't notice because they don't even listen.
Well, people might have noticed. They just don't feel the need to speak out.
Oh.
They're quiet. They've quietly unsubscribed, maybe. That would be terrible.
Exactly. I'll bet you we've had some people quietly unsubscribe for different reasons that I would love to hear the reasons.
Oh, okay. I definitely thought that was going towards me. I bet we've had people quietly unsubscribe because of that time.
Oh no, I didn't have a specific.
You clicked your mouse.
There was someone that was causing a bit of a ruckus in our Discord that I wonder if some people quietly unsubscribed from being a patron from, but we'll have no way to know, because people a lot of people are unsubscribing right now from being a patron just for other reasons because their hockey season's over. So anyway. By the way, Patreon, we're going to be announcing it today. We'll say it on the show, right? We'll tell all the patrons today. Go do it right now. Change to $1, but I'll do it on the show. Okay. Let's start. Here we go. Yes! Welcome everybody to another episode of the Keeping Karlsson Fantasy Hockey Podcast, the longest running fantasy hockey podcast in the world, hosted by 2 guys, one of whom is right in the middle of a semifinals matchup in Couple that couldn't be closer, and I have no idea how I'm going to even go through this show, Brian. It's all on you to carry this thing. I'm your host, Elie Tovenin. With me, the person who's going to be carrying me all night long, Brian, come!
Well, Elon's going to be me, and Mika Zibanejad has already done a lot of the heavy lifting for you tonight with an early hat trick. Like, not a late one. A late one would be like, oh, okay, like too little, too late. But has set you up in a position to hope that you might, just might, be able to catch Ben, who you were back behind. You're behind him 50 points. I think it was Friday, and you were like throwing in the towel. And I was like, Elon, like I see a path to victory for you, or at least for competition. And here we are. So I hope you can stay focused on helping everybody else win their matchups as we head towards the final weeks of this fantasy hockey season. But I wish you the best over the course of the show. And if anybody notices wild mood swings in Elon's voice, like if the tone doesn't match the content, just know that there is some very heavy stuff happening in the background of this entire episode.
Well, I'll just tell you, I need Zibanejad, like some more points. I definitely won't complain. I have Wade Allison for some stupid reason. I picked him up on Philly because I saw he was on the top power play. That was a useless ad. Should have added someone else there. Then I've got... Well, whatever. Okay, I don't know. He was a backup bid, and I ended up getting him. Then I have Seth Jones and Eric Cernak in this Columbus-Tampa game. It's 2-1 Columbus after a period. No points for Jones or Cernak. Let's go, guys. So, okay, we'll see. And then Ben has a whole bunch of people. He's probably going to win. Anyway, no one cares about that. They care more about us, like you said, trying to help them. And so we have got a whole document here of research that we've done that we're going to be presenting to you on this show. So I hope you enjoy our TED Talk. Before we get to it, we will, of course, mention that we are presented by DobberHockey.com, the #1 fantasy hockey website in the world. It's just the place you need to be if you want to try to win. You're probably in the finals against someone else who knows what they're doing. So take any edge you can, read the articles every day, use the tools at Frozen Tools, and I think that might just give you what you need. So that's DobberHockey.com. Plus, they present this fine podcast. But okay, Brian, so let's get into it. We're trying to help people. A lot of people are going to their finals next week if they're so lucky. And number one, I would say, is look at the schedule. So before I even get to our content, I'll just say, if you are going to your finals, check, because next week is a weird week, right? First of all, Saturday, like every team is playing except for one. There's 15 games. So that means you're going to have a lot of people on your bench that day. Brian, you and I are in a joint league where we have a bunch of people on our bench also on Tuesday and Thursday. And then we have openings on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So like a smart fantasy player right away is going to know, all right, figure out who I'm benching on Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday. The person who's going to get no games from me all week. For us, it's probably Colin Blackwell. So like obviously drop that person for someone who's playing Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And there's a few teams out there. There's Anaheim, there's Arizona, there's LA, there is, I'm just looking at Winnipeg. Okay. So like San Jose, Colorado. So obviously you have to be smart. And we actually have a podcast to recommend to you if you want help trying to figure out who has a strong schedule and who I should consider. And that's the Stream Scheme, hosted by Dave Betton. And we really like that show. And yeah, definitely check it out. keepingcarlson.com/stream scheme.
Also linked to in the show notes for your extreme convenience. You really don't want to miss it this week. It is really just how to game the schedule. Elon uses it as a tool, and he's this master fantasy hockey strategist, which I told him before the show. I was going to wiggle in naming him that. I think, Elon, you are a master strategist. So you mentioned what you were already looking at with Colin Blackwell, and playing the schedule is a huge, huge part of the game. So we'll also make sure to mention players' schedules for the guys we're mentioning on this week's show. But enough talking about what we're going to do. How about we go ahead and do it?
Yeah, I'll even mention actually the person that we're targeting right now, and this is a super deep league. So if we drop Colin Blackwell, hopefully Webstar isn't listening to this. Well, actually, he's out of moves for the week, so I don't think we have to worry about it. But right now, the person that I'm looking at is Andreas Athanasiou over on LA. So this is not someone that we plan to talk about on this week's episode, but Athanasiou was apparently playing on the top line with Kopitar and Iafallo in the last game for at least part of the game. And LA plays Anaheim, who, this is not the Anaheim of old, where like, oh, John Gibson's pretty good, they're not going to let in too many goals. This is the Anaheim that lets in a ton of goals every single game. So I think if you're looking at like an Iafallo, if you're in a deeper league, grab your Iafallos and your Athanasious. I think that's your best bet, unless obviously it's a shallower league. And obviously if you grab someone good on Colorado, that's a whole other story. But that's where we're looking. But okay, Brian, let's get to our documented plan for the episode. Here's our plan. We're going to go through some injuries and outjuries that have happened over the past week and what impacts there are there. And then we're going to go over some hot streaks. And then if we have time, we did that draft last week of players that we're looking at for these next couple of weeks. So this past week and the week coming up. So we could just take a look at how it's going between me, you, and Jeremy, who's been a hit, who's been a miss, who we're excited about for next week, and who we think was, a whiff, and maybe we shouldn't have made those picks. And hopefully all of this will help people win their leagues. So, okay, we're going to start out with these injuries and outjuries, and let's start in Toronto. Okay. So obviously the short shifts guys, Ben and Lewis have already discussed this, but Zach Hyman is out. Still expect to be out another week with a sprained MCL, but Toronto isn't reeling as bad as maybe they would be normally because they got a new player in to take Hyman's place in Nick Foligno, who they acquired in that trade from Columbus, and Foligno had to quarantine and all of that, but he's arrived to the Leafs. 2 games so far, 2 assists. So pretty good. And he's jumped right up to the top line with Matthews and Marner, the best space you can be. That has left Galchenyuk to play with Tavares and Nylander, which isn't too bad, but obviously not as good as playing with Matthews and Marner, though Tavares has had himself quite a week. So Foligno, 34% rostered on Yahoo. To me, like, seems like an awesome Wednesday ad. Like, so next week Toronto plays Wednesday, Thursday, Saturday. So obviously, if you have to jump on him now just to make sure you get him, then sure, do that. But if you could somehow wait till Wednesday, and if Foligno's out there, I feel though it must be like, I don't know, inactive leagues or really shallow leagues. Like, how could you not want Foligno? I know Lewis was a little bit like lukewarm on him, but maybe that was before him getting points in a couple of games. I feel like if you're playing with Matthews and Marner, just come on. You're going to want Foligno, especially if your league counts hits, by the way, because he's helping you there. Brian, here's a random question for you to get this started, because I couldn't think of like a good, like, is Foligno worth adding? Obviously, he's worth adding, right? But there's another Foligno brother in the league who's actually doing pretty well right now, Marcus Foligno, who's on a nice run with the Minnesota Wild. He's got 4 points in his last 5 games, a quite 55-point pace on the season. So, Brian, if you were going to pick up one player for next week and it has to be a Foligno, which one would you go with?
Okay, well, let's look at Nick first, who has this limited sample as a Toronto Maple Leaf. In that limited sample, he's seeing less ice time, which was to be expected, and fewer shots on goal, according to his rate stats. That said, I don't really care much about any of that if Foligno is playing with Matthews and Marner. I feel like he could actually be a pretty good natural stand-in for Zach Hyman. I don't think Foligno is quite as quick, or, is obviously up to the standard that Hyman is set for being in step with Matthews and Marner and knowing how to play with them. But essentially, I don't care too much about all that because Foligno is still getting great exposure to Matthews and Marner. So if you're wondering where to stand on Nick Foligno, I'd be as into chasing him as I would have been chasing someone like Alex Galchenyuk, who, by the way, sidebar, has 1 goal and no assists in his last 8 games, despite terrific deployment.
Yeah, Brian, honestly, it's like, by saying that, it sounds like you're not interested in Foligno, right? Because even when Galchenyuk was in a good spot, I was like, whatever, he's Alex Galchenyuk. I feel like Foligno has higher upside. I'm interested in this.
So the comparison I'm trying to draw here is that if you were into, like, if you're wondering how into Nick Foligno you should be, you can answer that question by saying, did I ever care about Alex Galchenyuk? And you're saying, Elon, that you like him a bit more than Galchenyuk. I think that's fair to like him maybe a smidge more, but not a ton. And this is after, Galchenyuk, the Leafs rebuilt him, they fixed him, they rewired him, and still just 1 point in his last 8 games. So that's where I stand on Nick Foligno, being somebody who could or still might not do anything, even with such great exposure. As for Marcus, his brother, this guy is not slowing down. Somehow, Marcus Foligno has 16 points in his last 18 games, and that includes a break during which Marcus was injured. In those 18 games, Marcus has only taken 16 shots and has 7 goals. That's a 44% shooting percentage. And his teammates and he are shooting 15% at 5-on-5. So obviously none of that is sustainable. And there's also nothing special in Marcus's deployment alongside Joel Eriksson Ek and Jordan Greenway. He's just a guy grinding his way to some fortunate bounces, in my opinion. So I am wondering, okay, who is more likely to continue grinding their way of the Foligno brothers to more fortunate bounces? I would go Nick. The only reason I would go Marcus is that his hits have picked up something fierce since returning back from injury. Like, maybe he was playing a little hurt and wasn't taking the body as much, but Marcus Foligno now has 4 or more hits in 5 of his last 7 games. So if your league counts hits, I think I might actually lean Marcus Foligno, since I expect both brothers to have about an equal chance of hitting the score sheet any given night. But for points, I'll give Nick the edge, and for peripherals, I'll give Marcus the edge.
Yeah, I could see it being even. Like Marcus, he just somehow keeps on putting up points. Obviously, Minnesota is a good team. I guess you could look at their competition this week, and you've got Toronto playing Montreal and then Vancouver twice, and Minnesota is playing St. Louis 3 times. And St. Louis has not been good at stopping goals lately, and St. Louis might be down 2 defensemen. Both Parayko and Vince Dunn were injured recently, which we'll get to in just a sec. So maybe that would be another reason to lean Marcus. Yeah, probably a coin flip. So take a look, search on Yahoo for Foligno, and if you see either of those guys as free agents, you might want to consider adding them. on Wednesday or earlier. Though speaking of the fact that the Leafs don't play till Wednesday, I guess the other way to look at it is that if you have any Leafs, you might want to consider dropping them and getting like, there's some teams that play Monday and Tuesday. So if you could pull a fast one, drop someone, get a Monday, Tuesday game, and then like re-add the Leaf on Wednesday, something to consider. Brian, this is the strategist in me, I guess. And one player that I want to know if you would go through this gambit with is Morgan Rielly, because he's super cold right now. He's pointless in 5. And I don't know, like he's in a good spot. He's on the top power play. Like I don't see, that's why I guess I'm asking you, like, why is this guy cold? And like, is he someone that you would run that gambit with where you drop him, see if you could get him back on Wednesday? And if you don't get him back, maybe no big deal because he's not getting points anyway.
I'm actually going to leave. I'm going to tell you my analyst with my analyst hat on what I think of that, which is that's totally insane. And then I want you to come back with your strategist hat and tell me, would you actually do this? My advice is please do not drop Morgan Rielly just because he doesn't play till Wednesday. That's not even that long to wait. We have weeks.
Okay, but I want to know, like, why is he pointless in 5?
Okay, I'm going to get to that.
Okay, I'm ready.
Okay. I'm trying to even figure out the starting point. This idea is blowing my mind just that much. Unless you have a bunch of other 50 plus point defensemen to choose from in free agency that have upside to go on a nasty tear because they quarterback one of the most dangerous power plays in the league, you really shouldn't even be considering this idea, in my opinion. Morgan Rielly had a 5-game pointless streak to begin the year, and that was painful. And this is painful, but between those 2 pointless streaks, Rielly has barely gone back-to-back games without a point and almost has never gone 3 straight games without a point. So this is an aberration. This is something you would be really overreacting to if there's any risk that you're going to not be able to add Morgan Rielly back into your lineup. So yeah, I would definitely hazard against doing this. I don't think anything significant has changed with Morgan Rielly. This is just 5 pointless games. It happens. The points should still come back the same way we've expected them to come from him all season long.
Sorry. Okay, so you're saying that you're not seeing anything in the underlying numbers to indicate that there's something actually wrong with him. This isn't like when Couture was cold and then you were like, oh, he might actually be injured, because I'm seeing a lot of reasons why he's not getting points. This is just like Morgan Rielly's random cold streak, expecting to do well. Yeah, I mean, because I would be thinking, sure, you could grab like a Jamie Oleksiak or something from Dallas, get a Monday, Tuesday, get 2 extra games, and then, whoever you add for this Wednesday, Friday. Anyways, you're saying Rielly's going to be fine. So, okay. Just wanted to ask, and you've answered that you're not seeing any problems with Morgan Rielly. I'd probably not. I don't know. It depends on my situation. Depends how many ads I have, because you have to use an ad to pull this gambit as opposed to just holding on to Morgan Rielly. And I'd have to like plan out my whole week. At the end of the day, if I could swap out, let's say Rielly. Okay, Brian, here's the strategist. Okay. If let's say Rielly's averaging 4 points per game in my format. Okay. Unless I can add a defenseman from Monday, Tuesday, who's getting 2 points a game, like half as good. And then if I don't get Rielly back on Wednesday, I could get someone who gets like 3 points a game, like someone like not as good. If that math still might work out where I end up with more total points. If this is the last week of the season, I don't have to worry about having Rielly the following week. It might be smart to give up these games, but of course, maybe there's someone else you could just drop to get those Monday, Tuesday games. Maybe you don't have to drop Morgan Rielly. There's a lot that goes into it. I just wanted to know what's wrong with Morgan Rielly. You're saying nothing. So fine, let's move on to another injury, season-ending injury on Detroit. Dylan Larkin out for the season with an upper body injury. Looks like Valtteri Filppula was holding top-line duty on Saturday with Mr. 4-goal Jacob Verana and Philip Zadina in that crazy 2-1 loss where Bernier made 50 saves. So I guess I'm just going to throw this out. I know what the answer is. Like, I'm going to say that you're going to say that Filppula remains completely uninteresting to you regardless of his deployment, right?
Absolutely. There's no way that I'm interested in Valtteri Filppula, who I would honestly forgive you for not knowing is still in the league. It's kind of unfortunate that Dylan Larkin is out. I mean, he wasn't producing so well, but since coming back from his last time that he missed 4 games at the end of February and early March, he's actually been on a decent run, like not close to point per game, but just above a half point per game and healthy shot totals to boot. So I was really happy with what I was seeing from him. So it's a bummer that his season is over. Valtteri Filppula, 36 years old, hasn't been relevant since he was 30 years old. Elon, can you remember the team that Valtteri Filppula was playing for the last time he was fantasy relevant?
I'm thinking Tampa Bay.
Yeah, good for you. Bonus points if you can name his line mates.
I don't know. Martin St. Louis.
No, it wasn't that long ago. He was on the top line with Steven Stamkos and Ryan Callahan. This is in 2014-15, and he barely was a half point per game player. So really stretching the definition of fantasy relevance here. That was actually the same year that the triplets broke out, Johnson, Palat, and Kucherov back in 2014-15. So all this to say is that it's been a long time since Valtteri Filppula has been able to do anything for your fantasy team. And on this Detroit team, I don't expect that to change. While we're talking about him, Elon, a fun Filppula fact that I found while I was doing research on him for the show, he was a minus 42 last year. Oof. In 70 games, like not even a full season, although that was only second worst on Detroit. Andreas Athanasiou was a minus 45 in 46 games played for the Red Wings. And now I had this compulsion to go through all the worst plus minuses in recent history. Those definitely rank up there. I didn't go down that rabbit hole, but maybe one day, maybe in a patron cast, we can talk about it.
Yeah, the worst plus minuses of all time. Just goes to show that that's a really silly fantasy stat, because obviously now Athanasiou is on LA and he's not going to have as bad of a plus minus. So is it really a judge of the player, or are you just like picking players that happen to be on teams that let in fewer goals? Anyway, okay. So obviously I knew that you wouldn't be interested in Filppula, even if he's playing probably with Matthews and Marner, you'd be like, probably not. I don't know. I'd rather have Marcus Foligno. But I guess one guy on Detroit that could potentially take that spot and maybe be interesting, I'll see what you say, is apparently the Red Wings 2018 30th overall pick, Joe Vellano. So in the first round, 30th overall pick, Joe Vellano, he might be getting in the lineup this coming week. And you'd imagine that he could, if he gets in the lineup, he might have a shot to crack the top six, maybe even play with Vrana and Zadina, which, by the way, I guess like being on the top line in Detroit isn't even that exciting, right? There's no Mantha, there's no Larkin. So Vrana's obviously good. He had that huge game. And then Zadina, I guess, isn't a slouch, but like maybe I should just be asking if Zadina's even fantasy relevant before we start talking about the guy centering them. But I did want to bring up Vellano. So according to Coach Blashill, he's like still not cleared to play. I guess he's getting over an injury, but he might be in as early as Tuesday. So he could be in next week. Any interest in this guy, like either for next week or like just in a more deeper context? Like normally a pick at the end of the first round is not too exciting in fantasy, but I've heard his name come up a few times. I want to get your thoughts on Vellano.
Okay, yeah, sure. So Joe Vellano, first round pick, 30th overall in 2018. Detroit actually grabbed him with Vegas's first round pick, which they got in return for Tomas Tatar. That was one of the king's ransom of picks that Tomas Tatar returned and has since become untradeable somehow. Anyway, Joe Vellano out of Quebec, he had 20 points in 46 games in the Swedish Hockey League this year with Malmo as a 20-year-old. So he ranked fourth on his team in points, but he was behind some 27 and 28-year-olds. So not really bad for someone who was playing their second pro season and their first really with probably the most mature competition. I don't know if the Swedish Hockey League is harder per se than the AHL, where Vellano had similar numbers, 23 points in 54 games with Grand Rapids back in 2019-20. But your point about Zadina is pretty salient, right? Like we're not expecting a whole lot from someone like Filip Zadina, who's had time to play and acclimate to the NHL and has had opportunities, but is sort of just on Detroit right now, I think is the way to summarize his fantasy output. So I'm not going to go too hard on getting excited about Vellano, but I am happy that we're going to, before the end of this season, see what Vellano can show us in his first NHL action so we can start maybe coming up with ideas for what to expect down the road.
Yeah, because they could definitely use a second line center, considering right now they're leaning on Valtteri Filppula with Larkin out. By the way, next week, the reason why it's worth it, trust me, it's worth it for us to be talking so much about the Red Wings. Why are we even talking about this team that has no fantasy relevance? Next Sunday, there's only one game, and it's Detroit versus Tampa. So if that's your fantasy finals and you have moves left come Sunday morning, you're going to be dropping like all your players for any Detroit or Tampa player. So you might be actually looking at a Joe Vellano or a Valtteri Filppula, depending how deep your league is. So worth keeping an eye on the Red Wings. Sorry, Brian, you raised your hand.
Oh, maybe I was just reaching for my computer.
Okay. All right. So
it's
keep
over
going.
here now.
And since we're talking about the Red Wings, let's talk about a former Red Wing who is now injured in Petr Mrazek. He's been nursing a lower body injury, missed the last couple of games for the Hurricanes. In his stead, Alex Nedeljkovic has played 3 games in a row now. And after putting up 4 straight gems, he finally showed that he's human. He let in 4 goals out of 46, 4 goals on the 36. Human. Letting in 4 goals on 36 shots in the 4-3 overtime loss to the Panthers on Saturday. So for next week, Carolina goes Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and then Saturday. So there's a decent chance that Ned gets in the nets at least a couple of times. And also another reason that a patron shared that was really interesting was Pierre LeBrun tweeted that the Canes have an interesting situation where they are incentivized to play Nedeljkovic because if he plays, I think, 3 more starts this season, then his free agency status will switch from UFA to RFA. So obviously, why wouldn't the Canes and also just Nedeljkovic seems like their best option. Like they've been playing him over Reimer, not just because of this contract thing, but I'm sure it doesn't hurt. So all that to say, assuming Mrazek is hurt, you might be getting a lot of games from Nedeljkovic, 2 or 3 at the, at least 2, I'd say at the minimum, maybe even 3. So what do you think about this guy? And also looking big picture, assuming Mrazek is healthy come the playoffs, I'd be curious to get your take right now on who's going to get the net to start the playoffs for the Canes. Like Mrazek and Reimer, they're both unrestricted free agents after the season. I wonder if that plays into the decision at all or not.
Yeah, it's really interesting the way the Hurricanes have handled their goalies, and I'll get to that more in just a minute. But first, poor Petr Mrazek. He just came back. I remember how careful the Hurricanes were being about bringing him back. We're not going to bring him back just even a moment before he needs to. We want to make sure this broken thumb is perfectly healed and he's not at any risk of getting re-injured. And now, assuming that we categorize a thumb as being on the upper body, Mrazek has this other lower body injury that all of a sudden has come up, which is really unfortunate for him and the Hurricanes. But fortunately, Alex Nedeljkovic has been very good this year. He actually leads the league in 5-on-5 Delta Fenwick save percentage amongst goalies who've seen at least about 20 games. And he leads the league in that category by a tidy margin too. He's outplaying his expected Fenwick save percentage by 18 points. So he's expected to stop 9. He's expected to put up a 943 save percentage at 5-on-5, a Fenwick save percentage, but he's actually putting up a 961. For contrast, UC Saros and Andrei Vasilevsky are behind him at about 13 points above their expected save percentages. And then you've got Marc-Andre Fleury, Chris Driedger, and Thatcher Demko are the only other goalies in the league playing 10 or more points above their expected save percentage, which is just wild, right? Like what a weird list of players to be mentioning here. Nedeljkovic, Saros, Vasilevsky, Fleury, Driedger, and Demko. If you told me that those would be like the 7 best goalies in the NHL, you could have made millions, right? Making a bet on that. Mrazek has actually been even better, but in a very small sample, of course, because of all the time he's missed due to injury. And as far as Nedeljkovic is doing this well, I see no reason to play James Reimer instead unless he's needed. Nedeljkovic and Mrazek could share the net, but if I'm Rod Brind'Amour in the playoffs, I don't want Reimer starting every other night. So in case Mrazek is unhealthy, I want to use my time now to see what kind of load Nedeljkovic can withstand, both for the playoffs this year and for the future. And it's funny to be talking about Ned's future in Carolina, because here's a reminder that on January 12th, 2021, that's just 3 months ago, the entire league chose not to put in a claim on Nedeljkovic when Carolina put him on waivers. And they put him on waivers because they claimed Anton Forsberg, now of the Ottawa Senators. So all 31 teams were like, we don't have room for Alex Nedeljkovic on our rosters. And here he is playing like one of the best goalies in the league.
I mean, it just goes to show no one knows what they're doing with these goalies. You're just hoping for the best. Who thought Dustin Tokarski would go on the run he was on, though? Obviously, Mika Zibanejad has made Tokarski come a bit to earth today. All right, so next up, let's do some more injuries here. I mentioned on St. Louis, Colton Parayko and Vince Dunn both injured in Saturday's 5-3 win for the Blues over Colorado. Who knows? These injuries, like they might be back by next week. We haven't got an update yet on them. Torrey Krug, of course, took all the power play time on ice he could handle. He was going to get it anyways. Got a couple assists in that game. But if these guys are out to start next week's Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, Saturday set of games, Brian, I wonder if you'd be interested in someone like a Justin Falk, as someone like with potential to do something. Like, yeah, he's been quiet recently. He had a decent start to the season, right? 8 points in 15 games, ice cold lately, pointless in 5, just like Morgan Riley. But sometimes I guess the really hard, like the easy thing to do in fantasy, right, is just take the player who's hot. Then, we could look into deployment and all things like that. I guess the toughest calls are like, do you add a player who's been doing nothing just because you see a potential deployment change? I'm throwing this to you, Justin Falk. If Parayko and Dunn are hurt, does that mean Falk is someone that could finally take advantage and do something this week?
Of course it means he could.
Well,
Will
anyone
he?
could, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I almost see Justin Falk as another Justin that you like to bring up a lot. And that's Justin Schultz, who is capable, but often cold and can get streaky in the right situations, even without perfect deployment. So here's a situation where Justin Falk, who hasn't even been seeing second power play unit time, might just by default get some time with the man advantage. And we've seen like Mike Hoffman doing well on that second unit. So maybe there's a way that Justin Falk can get in on some of that action. The one reason that I would just tell you to stay away entirely from Justin Falk is we used to say at least he'll get you shots. That has not been the case during his career with the Blues so far. There was some daylight early in the season in his first bunch of games. He had an 8-shot game and he had 4 and 5 shots a few times, but over his last like 5 or 6, it's zeros, ones, and twos for the most part in the shots column for Justin Falk, which is not really inspiring thing. But of course, now he is going to be in the lineup and Vince Dunn won't be and Colton Parayko won't be. So if someone needs to shoot from the blue line, there's a higher chance it's going to be him. All this to say, I would weigh Justin Falk like I would a Justin Schultz in this situation. If you need to throw in a defenseman into your roster, you could do worse, but also don't get your expectations up too high.
Right. Yeah, I think that's exactly it. Like someone maybe to move a little bit higher on your watch list if those guys are injured. But at the end of the day, he's Justin Falk. He's been disappointing us ever since we started keeping Karlsson a long time ago when he was on the top power play in Carolina and still never did anything. Okay, so lots of points to go around on Saturday for the Blues. Ryan O'Reilly put up that big 3-goal, 1-assist stat line playing with Schenn and Kyrou. Schenn had a couple of assists themselves. And then there's a lot of streamer level guys that were getting points in that last game. And like I said, St. Louis has a pretty nice schedule next week. So I want to just throw some names at you. First of all, you mentioned Mike Hoffman. He scored on Saturday. He's on a great run, 5 goals and 2 assists in his last 5 games. He was like quiet for so long, but he's really heating up now, which is great for the Blues, right? They're hoping that he can help them down the stretch. Then, guys who are even more likely to be in your free agent pools, Tyler Bozak had an assist on Saturday, bringing him to 8 points in his last 6 games for Tyler Bozak. Remember when Bozak used to get a bunch of points in the Leafs, centering Phil Kessel? And we would talk about it on the show, and you would always be like, Tyler Bozak's no good. Like, I remember you were a big Bozak non-believer, and you obviously turned out to be right, because after Kessel left, that was the last time we pretty much talked about Tyler Bozak until now, because he's on this great hot run going into potentially a finals week with a good schedule. Then you also got Sammy Blais, who you've brought up in the past. He has 6 points in his last 7 games after an assist on Saturday. So yeah, which of these Blues, if any, do you have any interest in, in our deep league where we're looking at Andreas Athanasiou, should we instead be looking at like a Bozak or Blais as maybe someone with more potential to get points?
None of these guys, as you predicted, thrill me, Elon. I think I would lean, if I had to choose from the group, towards Mike Hoffman, who has 5 goals on 14 shots, which obviously is a high conversion rate, but 3 of those 5 goals came on the power play, as I just mentioned. So actually that's okay. But of course, the downside is Mike Hoffman is still just getting mid-6 minutes. Then you have Tyler Bozak, who's on this run playing with Jaden Schwartz and Vladimir Tarasenko, which is really interesting. But as you also mentioned, he's not someone you can get too you want to rely on too much to help you. And then Sammy Alundra Blais, you were so focused on my pronunciation of his name last week to remember that I don't know if you remember, I brought him up because he had that great deployment, but of course it's gone now. Jordan Kyrou has taken Blais's place on the line with Ryan O'Reilly and Braden Schenn. And of course, Kyrou has done nothing with it. So maybe that's still fluid. All this to say, I see reasons to be interested in Hoffman. I see reasons to be interested in Bozak. I see pretty much no reason to be interested in Blais. Some reason to be interested in Kyrou. I'm going to turn the tables on you, though, Elon, and finish my answer with a question for you. How many of these names that we've just mentioned, who has 16 points in 30 game injury and not a lot of shots on goal either, I almost feel like Schwartz belongs with this bunch of random guys in St. Louis just not doing anything or not doing anything consistently.
Okay, so I don't know if it was you or
Elon, can you hear me?
Yes. Okay, yeah, you glitched out big time and I didn't hear your question. So,
no.
But hopefully your recording is fine on Audacity, so we won't have to worry about that.
I got a message that my internet connection was unstable.
Are you plugged in?
No.
Why?
Because I don't need to be.
I thought we're always plugged in. Oh my God.
I don't need to be plugged in.
Well, Okay. All right. So anyways, what was your question?
So my question was, how many of these guys would you take ahead of Jaden Schwartz, who has 16 points in 30 games, 7 points in 16 since coming back from injury, and not a lot of shots? Because like what distinguishes Jaden Schwartz from the rest of these guys?
Okay. Doesn't hurt to plug in. I don't know. You still can. Anyway. Yeah, I guess like Schwartz is, has the history of being productive in the past. So I would probably still have him over like a Bozak. Like I think it would just like if I'm putting my season on the line, I'd rather have someone who's been reliable at least at one point. I'll take Mike Hoffman over, Schwartz for that same reason that Hoffman has been more reliable. And also if your league has a premium for goals, then why not go for the goals? But yeah, it's true. It's interesting over in even we talked about on the last episode, Tarasenko hasn't been as great as we thought that he would be. But I don't know. Maybe also, just like a Justin Falk, this like Kyrou situation. He's playing with Ryan O'Reilly, who just had this great game. Of course, Kyrou didn't even get any points. So yeah, there's a lot of Blues out there that are probably available to pick up, and they have a good schedule. So like, good luck trying to figure out which one to add because it changes all the time. I guess Bozak's the hottest right now, so maybe you just go with him. Okay, so let's get back to some injuries here. Oh yeah, sorry. Might as well just go with him. A guy that I was planning to bring up as a hot streak, but now I'm going to bring up as an injury is Matt Murray. He was injured in yesterday's 4-2 loss to the Canucks. Before that, Murray had been on a good run, and I was going to ask you, is there any chance that Matt Murray can keep this up? But I guess now it doesn't matter. And it was a weird situation because Anton Forsberg was scheduled to start the game, but he was injured just before warmups. So Murray played, then he got hurt. So Marcus Hogberg was there. He came in, stopped 18 of 20 in relief. Apparently, Artem Anisimov was dressing as a goalie potentially in case Marcus Hogberg would have gotten hurt. So that would have been pretty wild to see. But luckily for the Sens and for Hogberg, he's fine. And by now, I guess going into next week, if you're in a deep league and you need a goalie, the Sens play Monday, Wednesday versus the Canucks, and I'd imagine Hogberg is going to get both of those games. Do you have any interest in these two games against the Canucks?
No, I don't. Marcus Hogberg, out of all the Ottawa goalies, is probably the one that I'm the least interested in when he plays. Matt Murray, it's so sad because he was having a really good run, as you mentioned, over 4 plus 1/3 of a game, so 4 games plus 1 period. Matt Murray had stopped 124 out of 130 shots. So that's, just over 30 shots a night and fewer than 2 goals against a night. 954 save percentage for Matt Murray, which is the value that we really wanted from him coming into the season, which he provided in very brief doses. So it's not like I was under any illusion this particular dose was going to last so long, but it was really exciting. And then, of course, boom, he's hurt again. Good thing for him, the ink is dry on that contract he signed at the start of the year, right?
Yeah, the Sens that was a ridiculous idea. Like he's been so injury prone. Like it's nice to see that he's able to still be a successful goalie in the league, but this is like an Antti Raanta situation at this point. You can't rely on this guy. So good thing for them, I guess, that Anton Forsberg has looked pretty decent, though he's injured too now. So right now it's Hogberg. You're saying to not worry about him. And yeah, the Canucks are surprising us, scoring a lot more goals than we were expecting, thinking that they'd come in sluggish off of this COVID situation. But I guess the Canucks are good. And so yeah, if you need a goalie, obviously you could get some saves from Hogberg. And in some leagues, it just might be nice to get those 2 guaranteed games Monday, Wednesday. But yeah, I wouldn't expect great results as well. So Brian, we've got some more injuries to get to, then a few exciting outjuries, and we'll get to them in just a sec. But let's take a quick break. You're listening to Keeping Karlsson. Okay, so we are back, and Brian, we've still got a lot to get to. Like I said, let's go next to Dallas, your favorite place, where last week you finally turned it around and became a huge Dallas Stars fan after being down on them all season, and they suffered an injury. John Klingberg missed Saturday's game, didn't stop the Stars from peppering Jonathan Bernier and eking out the win over the Red Wings. Hopefully Klingberg isn't out long, but regardless, Dallas is also getting some good news, so at least it's not all bad, because according to Rick Bowness, Tyler Seguin will be ready to play at some point next week. So Brian, what kind of expectations should we have for Seguin to finish off this season? Like last year, 1920, Seguin put up a 59-point pace in the regular season, which was a lot lower than expectations. He's normally been like a point per game guy. And then he was super quiet during the playoff run. He had a couple big games right at the end versus Tampa, a 2-assist game and a 3-assist game that makes his overall playoff numbers not look as bad, but he was like basically doing nothing for most of the playoff run, though I guess a lot of people just want to blame that for good reason, right, on the injury that he had that ended up keeping him out until now. So Brian, any chance that we could be getting like this point per game Tyler Seguin back to end the season, or should we like be massively tempering our expectations? And like, does it even matter? Is it just like if he's available, just go grab him regardless of what your answer is?
I think you should probably go out and get Tyler Seguin just to see what happens. Because at worst, maybe he's a 55, 60 point player, which is probably better than a lot of what you can find in your free agency pool at this point of the year. And why we only say he's at least a 55, 60 point player and not a 70 point player, even a point per game guy, is because, like you said, Elon, his recent results aren't great. We know his playoff run was hampered by his injury, where he wasn't scoring a whole lot at all. And I think that's because his shot strength just wasn't there. But his regular season, even when he was healthy for most of it, as far as I know, was also reason to be concerned about Tyler Seguin. Is actually one of the reasons why I ended up getting down on all of Dallas, because Seguin was one example of a player who's really, 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 really good, but he was suffering from poor variance that I was convinced was no longer variance, was just a product of playing the way that the Dallas Stars played. And Seguin was also seeing less ice time and fewer opportunities to put up points than he had in previous years. So we'll see if he can come in, get some of those opportunities and ice time back. We'll see, because now he's got a new coach. I'd love for Seguin to come in and make some noise. I'm very curious to see how ready he is for full tilt action. So, sometimes when a player comes back from an injury, especially when it's 50 games into the season, they might need a game or two to get up to speed. We've seen Vladimir Tarasenko still not get up to speed. So don't bet on Seguin, but I think he's absolutely worth a look. And I think this also makes players who might be in your free agency worth more of a look compared to before without Seguin, like someone like Denis Gurianov, who is playing currently with his centerman is Jason Dickinson. Seguin's an upgrade there. Jamie Benn right now is the third piece on that line. So if Ben does stick there and get Seguin as a centerman, that'll help him too. But Ben also could be the one who loses a top power play role with Seguin's return. The other guys on that top unit are Rupe Hintz, Joe Pavelski, and Jason Robertson. And it's hard to imagine any of them being pulled from that top unit the way they're producing. So I think Seguin could replace Ben on the top power play. Or could you imagine, Elon, wouldn't it be so Dallas if Seguin just goes to power play too? Like they just keep their top unit intact and Seguin doesn't even get to crack it?
I mean, I think that's reasonable. Like if things are going well right now, why mess with it? And he's got to be eased into the lineup. You're saying it as if it's a bad thing. Like why not bring him to power play too, then see how things go. And you could always change it up a little later on. Yeah, I'm not like super, like I'm not going to be expecting Seguin to come in and get like hat tricks, right? So I don't know how much he helps like a Gurianov because he hasn't been playing all this time and hasn't been a training camp or anything like that. But hopefully he can have somewhat of an impact.
How many teams in the league, Elon? You're saying that you'd be fine with Seguin on a second unit. How many teams in the NHL have a player of Seguin's caliber on their second power play unit?
I mean, okay. I've been saying like to start. Like, are you saying right away, just like throw him to the Wolves and give him like 25 minutes a game?
Okay,
I mean,
maybe the next game, maybe the second or third game. I'm saying it would be very Dallas to just keep him on the second unit.
Well, okay. I mean, if they're bumping like a Jamie Benn or Robertson or Hintz, like Hintz has been like a superstar right now. I mean, you can't bump Hintz or Robertson. So you're saying maybe drop a Ben, who like obviously he's the obvious guy, but like
don't get me wrong. I'm not advocating for Robertson or Hintz or Pavelski to be bumped. I'm advocating for Jamie Benn, who is without a power play point in his last 9 games.
Yeah. So I'm not like a hockey expert here in terms of like how to run power plays. I know that Ben is like a net front guy and maybe there's a certain setup that's working and they'd have to shift things around. But anyway, we'll let Rick Bowness figure that out and we'll see what happens.
Adam in the chat is mentioning that with Klingberg being out, maybe that does just open up a spot naturally for Tyler Seguin. But
in the last game you said that it was you said it was Pavelski, Robertson, Hintz, Ben, and Heiskanen.
the only way that would work is if they went 5 forwards.
Sure, yeah, bump Heiskanen now. I don't think that would be a smart move. There is another defenseman I just wanted to bring up, who I brought up a little bit earlier on the show as a potential replacement for Morgan Rielly, and Jamie Oleksiak. I'm bringing him up just because our opponent next week in the Fantasy Hockey Trades Invitational, we've made it to the finals, and our opponent is Webstar, who's also a patron, and he has been really good this year. He knows exactly what he's doing, and he made the schedule knowledgeable move and added this Jamie Oleksiak character who's on a decent little run. He has 2 points in his last 3 games, 3 shots in each of his last 4 games. So you'd imagine maybe he should have even gotten a little bit better luck, maybe get a goal in there. All of a sudden, Oleksiak, who's normally just been a solid source for hits, he's actually down in hits right now, but getting some points. So Brian, Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday schedule, like I said, Do you like Oleksiak at all? Do you think that you've seen anything in this recent run to indicate he has the potential to be more offensively inclined? Or do you think this is just like a blip and he'll go back to being the same old Jamie Oleksiak that he's been for the last couple seasons?
Oleksiak had this nice little coming out party that started in the playoffs last season, where he went from being a bottom pair guy to a top pair mainstay. Like he had 15 minutes a night, night in, night out last season. Since the playoffs, he's a 20-minute guy, and that's given him more opportunity to take shots on net. Oleksiak has 2 or more shots on goal in 14 of his last 18 games, including in his last 8 straight. So that's nice. Oleksiak is a decent category filler, but I wouldn't get used to expecting the production to keep coming. He hasn't been any more offensive this year than usual. Like there's no new angle to his game. He just has more ice time. So in those extra 5 minutes, he's able to throw like another shot on net and of course be around to hopefully pick up a point. But I don't see it coming in any kind of way that we should change our expectations for Oleksiak as being a really low scoring defenseman.
Okay, yeah, and by the way, congratulations to Ben, who is going to the Cupful finals, because JVR just had a couple of late assists in the third period to tie the game for the Flyers against New Jersey. And now I'm going to basically need like a hat trick from Seth Jones and probably a goal from Eric Cernak. And I don't think that's going to happen. So good job, Ben. Ben and Dustin. It's going to be a very exciting Cupful finals to see who's the ultimate champion. But okay, Brian, let's get back to out juries here. So I brought up Seguin. We've got some other big names that are maybe going to be coming back next week. Like Seguin, Philip Forsberg might return, according to the Preds GM David Poyle. So that's exciting. And meanwhile, because we don't know for sure about Forsberg, one guy that's already come back is Elie Tovenin, who returned to the Preds lineup, got right back to his scoring ways, had a goal and an assist in his 2 games versus Chicago last week. Next week, Nashville goes Monday, Tuesday versus Florida to start. Tovenin has got to be a clear ad wherever he's available. Right? He's only 21% rostered on Yahoo, which I guess fine because he was injured and maybe people didn't have room on their IRs. Like I dropped him in one league because I didn't have room for him, and now I've since been eliminated from that league and I'm going to blame it on the Elie Tovenin injury. But anyway, if I was still alive, I'd be rushing to grab him for sure, right? Like he's clearly one of the top offensive producers on this team, and the Preds play Monday, Tuesday. So what else do you need?
You shouldn't need anything. Elie Tovenin, as we mentioned, just as he was getting on that top power play, has been the answer to the Nashville power play that has perpetually struggled. By the way, I have a new favorite Nashville Predators Twitter follow. His name is Byron Bader. I should probably hang on. Let me actually get his.
Someone wrote, "I love you" in the chat.
I love you too, Johnny Eichler. And it's not Byron Bader. I actually got the wrong name. It's Brian Baston, another a literal BB. It's Brian with a Y though. Okay. I'll just start my answer over for simplicity's sake. Cool?
Yeah, definitely. If you're going to mention how Tolvanen fixed the power play, then you should say it like as a bit self-effacing and that you say it every single week. So like, it's not as if you're saying something novel and interesting that people haven't heard before.
Well, you asking me if people should have Tolvanen is not saying anything.
Well, I know. I'm just saying if you're going to be like, as I've said every single week, as opposed to saying it like, did you guys know this fun fact about Elie Tovenin?
All right. Okay. All right. Yeah, you should absolutely have Elie Tovenin, as you should have, since, I mean, we've been telling you for weeks and weeks and weeks that Elie Tovenin has fixed the Nashville power play. And it's true, this perpetually broken power play, Elie Tovenin has been the answer. And I'll actually shout out someone who's been following that all along. One of my new favorite Nashville follows on Twitter is Brian Baston. He writes for On the Forecheck, and his handle is at Brian with a Y, Bastin. So follow him for all the important Nashville updates. But yeah, Elie Tovenin absolutely should be rostered in all leagues. Elon, last week in our draft with you, Jeremy, and I, in the band that Elie Tovenin was in, neither of us took him because he was injured, but we picked between us Gurianov, Connor Murphy, and PK Subban. I wonder how many of those 3 he will end up outscoring by the end of the season.
Well, definitely he's going to outscore PK Subban. That turned out to be a garbage pick for me because he ended up testing positive for COVID, and I'm sure he's out for the season. So that was obviously bad luck. We'll get to that at the end of the show, how I had some bad luck with my picks. I also had Dylan Larkin, by the way, who's out for the season like we've discussed.
If Elon loses, it's just bad luck, everybody.
Well, I mean, Normally that's just a fun excuse. I think that if your players are out for the season right after you pick them in a league with no ads, then it's kind of like, what are you going to do about it? But that's okay. It's all just for fun anyway. And yeah, so Elie Tovenin, go and grab him. There's some other Preds, by the way, that have been putting up points lately that I wanted to run by you, because not everyone is in a clown league where Tovenin is available. So we've got the line of Luke Kunin, Mikael Granlund, and Kalle Järnkrok that has been very productive, at least in this set of 3 games versus Chicago last week. All put up 3+ points. Granlund and Järnkrok are probably the most appealing since they've been getting top power play time with the great Elie Tovenin. But Kunin has been no slouch with goals in 3 straight games. Meanwhile, you've also got Victor Arvidsson out there, who's been cold lately with only 1 assist in his last 5 games after a solid stretch. So Brian, how would you rank these 4 potentially available Nashville forwards for the rest of the season if they're available? Arvidsson, and then the line of Kunin, Granlund, Järnkrok.
I'm not falling for this, Elon. Nashville is not a team that scores a lot of goals. They're ranked 24th in the league in scoring, and their schedule next week is pretty bad. They play Florida Monday and Tuesday, and then they don't play again until Saturday when they play Dallas. So they're playing 2 teams who have very good defenses and decent goalies, and they're not a high-scoring team to begin with. So I'm not really interested in Luke Kunin, Mikael Granlund, Kalle Järnkrok, or even Victor Arvidsson next week. But if I had to rank them, if you forced me to, I'd rank them in the reverse order I just said them. I wouldn't really change my mind based on anything that's just happened recently. I'd still go Arvidsson first, then Järnkrok, Granlund, and Kunin. The only change I might make is putting Järnkrok up ahead of Arvidsson. But all season long I've been like, Arvidsson should be doing better. And he's had these little spurts where it's like, oh yeah, this is obvious. You want Arvidsson. But none of these guys are reliable is the moral of this story.
Yeah, Brian, I agree with you. Like, I'm definitely not going to be expecting Luke Kunin to keep up getting a goal every single game. But Brian, you got to be smart with this. Yeah, they have a bad schedule overall on the week, but Monday, Tuesday, that's all you need. Then you drop the guy for Morgan Rielly on Wednesday, who you dropped to facilitate this whole thing. It's obvious.
Of course.
Okay, so more outjuries. I'm very excited to see that the Edmonton Oilers are finally playing games again. So after this dreadful schedule over the recent history of like 1 game a couple weeks ago, a couple games last week, they're going to play 4 games next week, and they've got Ryan Nugent-Hopkins back in the lineup to help your Oilers players produce. He returned to the Oilers for Wednesday's game versus the Habs and scored a power play goal. And now let's look what the lines were on Wednesday. The Oilers won the game, so let's assume they're going to stick, which had Nugent-Hopkins back with that Dre and Yamamoto back with that Dre and Yamamoto pairing, which was obviously so strong at the end of last season. And that left McDavid to play with Puljujarvi and Josh Archibald. So Puljujarvi, I guess, is the most appealing of the potential available guys. He has goals in each of his last 3 games. I guess that's what happens when you play with a Connor McDavid, who he was like on a mission. Like, he knew that fantasy managers drafted him first overall and were depending on him. And then he had only a 2-game week. So he was like, I'm just going to give you 3 points per game just to get you caught up. And that's exactly what he did. So your McDavid is great, which means Jesse Puljujarvi was able to get a couple of goals assisted by McDavid, of course. So I imagine you're not going to disagree about Puljujarvi, but should we recommend the Yamamotos and or the Archibalds because of who they're playing with and a good schedule, regardless of how cold they've been? I guess Yamamoto has 3 points in his last 5 games, so that's not nothing, but it's not especially exciting considering he's playing with Draisaitl and Ryan Nugent-Hopkins. In a multi-category league, I may even want Archibald because he has that exposure to McDavid. This could change like every game, but for now, if Archibald is playing with McDavid, maybe he lucks into a secondary assist, and he's been getting a ton of hits, so he can help you there. So Brian, Yamamoto, Archibald, any interest?
No, not a whole lot of interest. Yamamoto has had Leon Draisaitl with him virtually every game this season and has just 20 points in 43 games to show for it. It's really nice that he gets to play with Nugent-Hopkins now too, and maybe some of that chemistry from last season is about to be reignited. But as we talked about that many times, that chemistry was totally unsustainable and unreasonable to expect to continue and carry over into this season. I have hopes that Yamamoto can still do well. And sure, if you need a streamer and he's one of the most intriguing options available, sure, he could get a point, but I'm not reaching for him just because suddenly he's with Draisaitl and Nugent-Hopkins. I think Draisaitl would be enough. And then for Archibald, he's probably like a Zach Kassian, Alex Chiasson level guy. And Elon, I'm actually going to also go back to Jesse Puljujarvi, who, it's crazy. We've totally flipped. You're pumping his tires for having scored in his last 3 games. And I'm going to throw the cold water and be like, hey, he's still not doing that well, considering he's playing with Connor freaking McDavid. So I looked into this, and Puljujarvi's IPP is down below 50%, which means on all the goals scored while he's on the ice, he gets a point on fewer than 50% of them, which can mean one of two things. The first thing it could mean is that Puljujärvi is actually not capable of contributing. Like, he's not at all an integral part of the offense. It pretty much operates without him. He's just a passenger to the extreme. Like, he's not even getting in on creating goals. The other possibility is Puljujärvi has just not gotten a whole lot of luck in being able to cash in on points for plays he has been involved with. And I think maybe the answer at this point is a little of column A, but mostly column B. So I would expect Jesse Puljujärvi in a full season with Connor McDavid to have an IPP that's not around the level that we'd see from, say, a higher end defenseman at 45%. I would expect Puljujärvi's IPP to be closer to the 60% range, maybe even 65% range, at least for now. Like, it could go up from there if he's more elite, but 45% would be very curious for a forward. So anyone discounting Puljujärvi's stats, I said I was pouring cold water on him, but actually, guys, it's okay. Puljujärvi might still be able to do more than what we've seen him do so far.
Yeah, I mean, well, he scored in 3 straight games, so obviously maybe that started to turn around. But I do think that the way the Oilers work is sometimes McDavid just decides to take the puck and do it himself because he doesn't want to pass to anyone. And he was nice and he passed to Puljujärvi a couple times last week, so Puljujärvi got a couple of goals. But yeah, like, this is not a normal team. Like, he has an IPP of 45% because sometimes McDavid just does it himself, and that's all. You know, maybe Tyson Barrie has it. He passes it up to McDavid to get the play started, and then you sit back and watch. And that's just how it goes. Brian, so far it's been a lot of cold water here. Hopefully we'll have someone to recommend, because it was like no on Nick Foligno, no on Phil Pula. We weren't into Justin.
I mean, okay, you want to go back?
No. I'll move forward.
An ish on Nick Foligno, an ish on Marcus Foligno, a yes on Morgan Riley, a no on Phil Pula, a no on Vellano, a yes on Nedeljkovic. That was easy. Go ahead on Justin Falk. Should I keep going?
No, okay. I'm just saying, okay, we'll see as we keep going.
Sagan, I was all over.
Yeah, sure. Sagan's probably not available for anyone, though. But I'm going to get to some really like deep guys coming up soon. So we'll see how many hits we can have. I'm trying my best here. The problem is I feel like people that are in the playoffs like already know about the obvious players, right? So I'm trying to just bring up some hot streaks or guys in good situations. It makes sense that you're going to say no on most of them. All we need is a couple hits, and those will be the recommendations. Then we could walk home and say we made a useful show.
Yeah, or this is just the nature of where we're at in the season. And if the question is, can we reasonably expect these guys to keep producing? The answer is no, but might they have the best chance out of all the free agent possibilities in your league? Yeah. So I think if you frame the question differently, I would be like, yeah, for sure. Go for it.
Okay, well, I've got more for you now. We're going to the Winnipeg Jets. Blake Wheeler is back because we're in an outjury section here, and he returned to the Jets for 2 games versus Toronto. He had an assist and 2 shots in the first game back, no points and no shots on Saturday. So yeah, Wheeler, frustrating, right? So people drafted him really high. Hasn't had the most amazing season. It's not like a terrible season. Anyways, whatever. People are obviously going to hold on to Wheeler for next week. Winnipeg has that sweet Monday, Wednesday, Friday schedule. So you definitely want to get Wheeler and any other Winnipeg Jet that Brian is going to give the thumbs up for. So let's see if there's any Winnipeg Jet that interests you that might be available. So let's see here. Pierre-Luc Dubois. He's been doing some stuff lately, 4 assists in his last 6 games, which isn't amazing, but maybe better than, what he was doing before. Paul Stastny is super boring as always. 3 points in his last 7. He's playing with Ehlers and Dubois. So those are like the top 6 guys that seem like the most obvious, but I wonder if we should like overthink this, galaxy brain this a bit, and say, maybe you skip over like a PLD and a Stastny. Maybe the third line guys are more appealing because you got Andrew Kopp, who had another multi-point game on Thursday, goal and an assist, nothing on Saturday, but Kopp's been, a lot more exciting than a Paul Stastny or a Pierre-Luc Dubois all throughout the season. I know you had an interesting conversation on Discord all about Andrew Kopp, which maybe you'll continue here on this show. And then also I'll throw out Mason Appleton, right? 2 points on Thursday, no points, but 4 shots on Saturday. So would it be crazy to start recommending that if people want a Winnipeg Jet next week, even in a shallow league, you skip over your PLDs and Stasnys, you go right to Kopp and Appleton?
No, I'm not going that far. Kopp is someone who looks like this year's Brian Rust, but as you mentioned on Discord, I gave a lot of reasons why Brian Rust did what he did last year and why Andrew Kopp is doing what he's doing this year, but they're not equivalent. Brian Rust had sustained great deployment and landed on the top power play. Andrew Kopp has not had sustained great deployment and is largely still playing on the second unit and pacing unsustainably for like 15 power play points. Oh, sorry. Kopp is actually pacing for 24 power play points on the season right now from the second unit, which is not sustainable. What Russ did last season was he got more reliable deployment, and his numbers were actually closer to something that we could expect to carry through next season. So that's why I'm still like, I see this single game outburst potential from Andrew Kopp. That's lovely. But he's not shooting a lot. He's in the bottom 6. He's on the second power play unit. So no, I'm not interested in him. I'm even less interested in Mason Appleton, who, yeah, he's shooting. So I'll give him that because that's more than Pierre-Luc Dubois is doing. But at least Pierre-Luc Dubois is on a better even strength line, although not on the top power play, because Paul Stastny is on the top power play. And Stastny is sort of the middle ground. Like he's a little bit of Kopp, Appleton, and Pierre-Luc Dubois because he's not scoring points, but he is shooting a little more. So maybe Paul Stastny is the pick just because he's on the top unit. But if he and Pierre-Luc Dubois flipped on that top unit, I would go with Pierre-Luc Dubois. So as usual, it's kind of just a lottery with these Winnipeg depth forwards. We thought that we'd be able to see 2 solid lines of fantasy relevance from Winnipeg this year because of the addition of Stastny and because of the addition of Pierre-Luc Dubois. And I guess I don't think losing Patrick Laine was really influenced how I felt about that. And we still don't. It's a real big bummer that it's so hard to find relevance from Winnipeg, who sometimes has this great off-day schedule and just only guys you're just throwing darts on to try and win the lottery on a night that Andrew Kopp actually shows up.
Yeah, I'm gonna say this is like just a gut feeling, which is not backed by like everything you're saying makes more sense. You generally want to go with the players who are getting better deployment, but like I've just kind of come to realize to never rely on Paul Stastny because he always lets me down every time I add him. So it's like I would rather have Appleton or Kopp over Paul Stastny. I'm just gonna say it.
Yeah, I named Stastny as the best of the group, but he is someone who's given me nothing this year or last year for that matter, for someone who's had so much opportunity for so long. So I hear you. It's hard for me. Elon, does this fly counter to what you said on the show a couple weeks ago about Riley Smith, who's had great deployment for so long and done nothing with it? And I was like, forget it. Like, have we flipped? Because I was like, I'll take Tomas Nosek on the third line. I don't care about deployment because Riley Smith has never done anything with it this season. And you're like, oh, yeah, I'll still take Riley Smith because of that deployment.
Yeah, I guess you're right. And I was wrong there, right? Smith continues to do nothing. Now he's injured. So I think he did get 1 point.
He had a great week.
Yeah, so I guess maybe if I really want to dig into this, Riley Smith has been relevant more recently than Paul Stastny. Like I think Paul Stastny let me down last year and I think the year before also. So
every year.
It's like Riley Smith I still have memories of him being useful in fantasy from the same spot. So maybe like next year, Riley Smith will turn into the Paul Stastny if he continues to do nothing. But for now, yeah, I just have this hunch that you're going to want, if you have Kopp and Stastny out there, I'm taking Kopp. And like, I know you're saying why not, like reasons not to, but I'm taking Kopp there and I'm happy with it.
Yeah, I might also fly in the face of logic and go with Andrew Kopp over Paul Stastny too. It is a total gut call, but it seems like Kopp has a better opportunity for a big night or a better likelihood for a big night somehow than Paul Stastny.
Okay, so let's do one more set of outjuries and get back to some hot streaks. So over in New Jersey, we're obviously going a couple tiers down from the Nugent Hopkins and Wheelers, but we have Jesper Bratt and Pavel Zacha. They've both returned to the Devils and have been playing on a line with Hischier at even strength, and then on the top power play with Hischier, Hughes, and Will Butcher, because like we mentioned, PK Subban is out with COVID, and Ty Smith is also out of the lineup. The Devils actually played today, so I have these lines that I referenced from when I prepped yesterday. They're in the shootout right now, actually, against Philly. So I can give you, using frozen tools, the live game lines, and it's been Zacha, Hischier, Bratt, yeah, just like it was before, and then Jack Hughes playing with Kuokkanen and Sharon Govich. All of that to say, I don't really know what to say, right? Like, I feel like none of these guys are that interesting to me. Like, yeah, the Devils scored 3 goals this week, and that next week they play against Philly. So that would be a reason why you want to go over some Devils, because Philly hasn't been good defensively either. Jack Hughes is the only one who's been especially interesting. But if you do have room for Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday, which are the busier days, so you might not. So definitely don't grab a Jesper Bratt if you don't even have room for him in your lineup. You have to bench someone else. But are you interested in a Bratt or Zacha or Hischier or anyone aside from Jack Hughes on this team for next week playing against Philly?
They're all streams, but I would go Hischier first, then Bratt and Zacha. That line, by the way, did point together for New Jersey's third goal. in Sunday's game. That's tonight. The other goals were scored by other lines. Bottom six, Michael McLeod with a goal from Nathan Bastian and Miles Wood with a goal from Nathan Bastian and Damon Severson. So big night for anybody with Nathan Bastian or Miles Wood on their rosters. But yeah, what you're saying about this New Jersey team is pretty true. It's hard to love anyone aside from Jack Hughes, who now has 4 or more shots in 5 straight games going into tonight. Elon, do you think he did that again? He did 4 shots tonight. So that's five of the last 6. Jack Hughes has taken 4 or more shots in goal. I will mention that maybe ahead of Hischier, Bratt, and Zaka, and this is also a gut call, I might go Sharangovich, who has been doing pretty well. No points today, but he had 4 points in his last 5 going into today, reliable for 2 or 3 shots most nights, and had 5 shots against Philly in today's game. So I'd probably rank all of those guys pretty evenly behind Jack Hughes. That's Hischier, Bratt, Zaka, and Sharangovich.
Yeah, I'll agree with you there. I don't think it's even worth discussing too much, to be honest.
There's too much time spent on all of them.
Yeah, Will Butcher, by the way, on the top power play, no points today. He's like a nothing, like no matter what. He's I guess like Phil Pula, right? Like whatever deployment he gets, you still don't want to rely on him to get you any points. Then in nets, by the way, like Mckenzie Blackwood. What a terrible season, right? Like this is terrible for a guy who we were so excited about going into the year. He had a really good run last year. Obviously, we're not going to be recommending him next week. I have no faith that he or any other Devils goalie is going to give you good rates. I'd rather have Marcus Hogberg, to be honest, than Mckenzie Blackwood for next week. But like, what do you think about Blackwood in the keeper context at this point? Like, has this season's disaster been enough to say that Blackwood is probably not going to be a great goalie in the future? Or should we be like, all right, this has just been a weird year. New Jersey's been kind of a mess, and like Blackwood should still be exciting. And maybe in your keeper leagues, now's the time to get like him for super cheap because no one thinks he's good anymore. He lets in 3 goals every game, 3 or more. Like it's very rare to get a 2 goal or less goals against for Mckenzie Blackwood this season.
Earlier in the show, talking about Nedeljkovic, we were talking about goalies who were 10 points or more above their expected 5-on-5 Fenwick save percentage. Blackwood is 10 points below his expected 5-on-5 Fenwick save percentage, which is not where you want to be. That is officially a bad year. He's in the same territory as Ilya Samsonov, Mikko Koskinen, and Elon, get this, I was surprised to see this name with this group, Kaapo Kähkönen, also underperforming his expected Fenwick save percentage by a chunk, kind of having a Dubnikian season where he looks really good because he plays for Minnesota, but under the hood, there are questions. Anyway, for Mckenzie Blackwood specifically, this is definitely like his poor performance this season is the outlier in his career. And honestly, don't begrudge him too much for how poorly Blackwood has played based on the workload he's had to take on because New Jersey still doesn't have a backup. And also he had COVID earlier this season. So he's coming back from COVID and is playing probably too many games. Yeah, I excuse Mckenzie Blackwood and the performance he's giving us. He's not, like you said, Elon, he's not a great shot to take on a stream. You could always try if you're desperate because he has the capacity to be a good goalie. But on the whole, I'm not that interested in Blackwood for the rest of this year. But if you're looking in a keeper context, I actually hold him in pretty decent regard still. And I'm willing to just throw this season out the window when I'm ranking him in my leagues next year.
Yeah, from what I heard going into the year, New Jersey has a strong prospect pool. So perhaps this could be a team like people talk about LA, right? That like in the future, they could be kind of strong and you'd hope that Blackwood could be their goalie. We'll see. He'll obviously have to do better than he did this year, though it's not as if there's any other goalie on the Devils who has done any better, like Aaron Dell, Wedgwood. They've all been terrible when they've played. So it's just been a bad team overall. Okay, so Brian, let's do some hot streaks now. We're going pretty deep, like I said, so I have a feeling you're going to say no to all of them, except maybe this first one. But I just want to mention a bunch of hot streaks. And like, normally we do a segment called Sustainable or Fleeting, but I know that there's no point because obviously any player who's like a point per game over the last 6 games, who's generally not rostered in fantasy, you're going to say fleeting. So it's a boring question. So how about let's change the branding of this segment? I'm going to call it rosterable or not stirrable. And you just have to say, is this someone you'd be interested in having on your roster right now? Or do you think that even regardless of them being hot for the last couple of weeks, you still expect them to go back to getting like no points next week, and everything has just been a total aberration. So I'm going to start with, I think, an easy one. Let's just say it's Sam Bennett. Like, enough is enough on doubting Sam Bennett, right? Like, this has been an insane run for him since he got to Florida. 3 goals and 3 assists in 5 games since joining Florida. Obviously, playing with Huberdeau, they have some chemistry. Also, Duclair is doing well. That line has been really strong. He had a great stat line on Saturday: 1 assist, 6 shots, 4 hits in the 4-3 win over Carolina on Saturday. So this is an easy one, right? Rosterable or nosterable? These plays Monday, Tuesday. We're saying rosterable, right?
Very, very rosterable for Sam Bennett. And if I wanted to be a jerk, I could be like, this just shows how great Jonathan Huberdeau is, that he can drag around an anchor like Sam Bennett and feed him points too. But I'm not going to go there. Sam Bennett has been excellent in Florida. And I feel like there's a lesson here for me. Like, I didn't write off the possibility he'd be good in Florida, but I did take the opportunity of him being in the news and like new and noteworthy in his trade to Florida to just crap on Sam Bennett and be like, he's bad, he's not a good player, we'll see if he can do anything in the top 6. Like, my mind wasn't closed to this happening, but maybe it wasn't as open as it could have been. He's seeing in his last 3 games, 19, 21, and 22 minutes. This is a guy who like was fighting to see 10 or 11 minutes in Calgary this year and at times last year too. So holy cow, Sam Bennett just blowing us away and putting up hits too. He's got 19 hits over 4 games to go with his 16 shots and 19 PIMs for anybody who wants. He had that big game where he had 17 penalty minutes. So way to go, Sam Bennett. I don't know what else to say aside from absolutely rosterable. Oh yeah, I want you to teach me, Elon. What's this teachable moment mean for me?
Well, first of all, you know who he's reminding me of right now in terms of his stats and the team he's on and playing with Huberdeau, kind of reminding me of a Vincent Trocheck. I know it's a different position, but Trocheck on Florida was, this guy that gave you hits, gave you the shots, got points every once in a while. Now he's on the top power play, just like Trocheck was. So obviously it's like a Trocheck light, but I feel like what Trocheck was back when he was on Florida, it seems like Bennett's stepped in a little bit. Anyways, that's why I like throw a little analogy out there. Anyways, as far as the lesson, I learned something very quickly when Joel Quenneville became the coach, and especially this year, is that Florida's magic. And we've seen these players that were nobodies, like Carter Verhaeghe, come over, and and Patrick Hornqvist, who wasn't a nobody, but like had seemed like he was done being productive in his career, and they comes to Florida, and all of a sudden he's a superstar again. So I just think that Joel Quenneville is a really cool coach, and he's like, I don't care about your past history. I'm going to give my new players a shot and see what they can do. And obviously Bennett has stepped up. Like, Daryl Sutter didn't like Sam Bennett, and he wasn't going to give him a shot. And so his low ice time, sure, obviously part of it has to do with Sam Bennett not being good enough, according to Daryl Sutter, to earn more. But obviously Quenneville was like fresh, clean slate, and he's producing.
Okay. Yeah. So coaching and magic, I guess, is the is the answer here. I mean, it's nice that Bennett got a fresh start. And I guess if Florida traded for him, they wanted him. They saw something they liked. Oh, by the way, this is not a fresh start, but while we're talking about Florida magic, Mckenzie Weegar, holy cow, he made and broke countless fantasy matchups with that monstrous line on Saturday night. A goal, 3 assists. This is a defenseman with 7 hits and 7 blocks. That's 21.75 cupful points, which is nuts, right? Like a good rosterable forward is like 4.5 points a night. If you're really good, you get over 5 points a night. This was 22 rounded, 22 cupful points on Saturday night for Mckenzie Weegar, who definitely tilted a bunch of matchups with that performance. He'd been pretty quiet leading up to that. I feel like there were a ton of managers who would let him go already, which would suck. Like, I wouldn't have blamed them. He's through the season been a good depth defense ad, but he had just stopped filling most categories for a few games until Weegar went ahead and just was a destroyer of worlds on Saturday nights. So just wanted to shout him out. Way to go, Mckenzie.
Yeah, and I guess maybe that's an example of like sometimes a player is going to give you a good run or a good stat line, at least for one night, even if he's not getting that great deployment. Because you look at like Florida in that game on Saturday, Weegar wasn't the second power play defenseman. It was Brandon Montour, who has done nothing since arriving to Florida. Actually, he scored a goal in one of the games against Tampa Bay. But aside that, he hasn't done very much. It was Mckenzie Weegar. Florida actually has a bunch of interesting defensemen, right? There's been times this season when Gustav Forsling has been worth a look. Mathieu and I added him in our Dynasty League, and I'm pretty happy to have him moving forward. I'm curious to see what contract he's going to get next year. Also, Marcus Nudivara at times has gotten points. Like, I'm not saying they're like super exciting, but Florida's just, they're a well-rounded team. I'm very excited to see what they'll do in the playoffs. I would have been like more excited about them if they had Aaron Ekblad. That was obviously such a huge hit to them, but it seems like they're, doing as well as you can expect considering they lost Ekblad.
Yeah, well, you were asking me about those Nashville guys. I'm like, Nashville doesn't score a lot, and they're playing Florida twice on Monday, Tuesday. Well, Florida plays Nashville twice on Monday, Tuesday. And so maybe you might want to stream in pretty much, Elon. Honestly, I would take a lot of these defensemen over the forwards you mentioned. I don't know. Is that nuts?
No, I guess, especially if you need some hits and blocks that defensemen are generally going to give you more of.
Assuming the peripherals are going to help you. Yeah, I'll take those peripherals plus the potential for points on a Florida team that is quite offensive versus these Nashville guys who either get a point or don't fill any categories.
Yeah, and so if Florida plays Monday, Tuesday next week, I don't think we've heard anything about the plans for goalies, but they have 3 right now because Spencer Knight came in, played his first career game this week on Tuesday versus Columbus, and he was great. He stopped 33 of 34. Then Bobrovsky and then Drieger played the next couple of games. So I wonder if they're just going to now go Knight, Bob again. Maybe they're going to just keep on rotating them. So there might be another game from Spencer Knight next week. So that could be a really good spot start if you can fit him in, because he seems like he's the real deal and Florida's a really good team. All right, so Brian, let's go to some deep cuts here. So feel free to get your cold water bucket out, but I'm kind of interested in these guys. So Vinny Hinostroza over on Chicago. He's like the one counter example of Florida magic because he was doing nothing this season when he was on Florida, but he's been since traded to Chicago and he's been awesome. He has 6 points in his last 4 games. And on Friday, he was playing with Patrick Kane and Pius Suter. So great deployment. He's on a good run. I don't know, Brian, Vinny Hinostroza, anything?
Yeah. That's
rosterable or nosterable. I forgot that's the name.
Yeah, kind of rosterable. I'll give him a rosterable. I mean, obviously it depends on the league, but we've seen Hinostroza have success in Chicago in the past as a half point per game player who does get some play already in Chicago. He's doing more than he was ever given the opportunity to do in Florida. In Florida, he was lucky if he hit 10 minutes in a night. He was lucky if he was dressed in a night. But now Hinostroza is playing mid 6 minutes for Chicago with occasional good line mates, has 7 shots over his last 3 games, throws in some hits here and there. So yeah, I would call that rosterable in a deep enough league.
Yeah, and then I guess another guy on Chicago who should mention is Brandon Hagel, the rookie. He was also on a good line playing with Kirby Dach and Alex DeBrincat, at least in the most recent game on Friday. He had a good 1-goal, 2-assist game versus Nashville on Wednesday. So I would probably have him below Hinostroza, but if you want a Chicago player, those are the 2 that are currently in decent spots. I guess there's also Kirby Dach, who's probably still available in a lot of leagues. Dach hasn't been like that exciting. Like, would it be crazy to want Hinostroza over Dach, or would you just rank them Dach, Hinostroza, Hagel?
Yeah, I do that second part.
Okay, fair enough. Okay, then now, this is going to be a crazy name that I'm ready for you to, well, you would scoff if you didn't know it was already coming, but Cody Ceci is still in the league and he's on Pittsburgh now. I don't know if people are aware, but not only is he on Pittsburgh, but he was on a 5-game point streak going into today's game where I'm assuming he didn't get a point because Pittsburgh won 1-0. And it was Brian Dumoulin, the defenseman, who got the 1 assist on the Gensel goal and then Crosby got the other assist. But anyways, before that, Ceci was on a great run. He's having a much better season offensively than John Marino, which is pretty shocking to me as someone who definitely had too high of hopes for a John Marino. So obviously Ceci's also he's been fantasy relevant in the past, even when he wasn't getting points, just because of all of his blocks. Like, he was decent enough for the peripherals. So Brian, Cody Ceci, who's now shown some offensive flair on Pittsburgh, and he's generally pretty decent for peripherals. Is he rosterable or nosterable in a multi-cat league for next week?
Well, you might be surprised to hear me say this, Elon, but I am going to say Cody Ceci is rosterable. He's finding comfort as this mid-pair option in Pittsburgh, which is different than the way that Ottawa tried to use him after drafting him and he started his career there. In fact, this year, Cody Ceci is seeing his lowest average time on ice since his rookie year. He's seeing 2 minutes less on average than he did in Toronto last season and 4 minutes less a night on average than he saw in Ottawa when they were like, okay, well, we're just going to play Cody Ceci. It was like the Eric Goodbranson method. We're just going to put him on the ice all the time. And I think things are just going to work out. It didn't, but in Pittsburgh with a decreased role, this might just be working out for Cody Ceci. You only mentioned what he'd done over his last 5 games, Cody Ceci going into tonight had 11 points in his last 14 games. That's after having 6 points in his first 31 games. So this is with also his time on ice creeping up. And remember, there is some offensive pedigree from Cody Ceci. When he came to Ottawa, it was like this two-way puck moving defenseman who could chip in and get a point every so often. So maybe now that the rest of his workload is being managed, maybe he's in more of a spot to succeed in Pittsburgh than Ceci has ever been before, which is why I am calling him rosterable as like a 4th or 5th defensive guy. Like I wouldn't want him in one of my top 3 slots, and I wouldn't bother to add him if I was feeling pretty good about my 4 core D.
Yeah, and Boston doesn't have Yeah, and Pittsburgh doesn't have an amazing schedule next week, just Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday against Boston and then Washington twice. So obviously you need to make sure that you'll actually be able to fit him in. But I see a lot of fantasy players who go with if it's a league with 4 D spots, they just run 3D and then have an extra forward on their bench. So if you're in that situation, then you're looking at, I could actually add Cody Ceci and get 3 games, or add Vinny Hinostroza and only get 1 game. Maybe then it becomes an easier choice for you. All right. How about, I guess another guy in Pittsburgh. I'll mention Teddy Bluger, 5 points his last 5 games going into today, playing on a line with Kasperi Kapanen, who's outjured, and Zach Aston Reese. This is like really deep. I don't know, Nostrable, right? Or are you into Bluger?
No, Nostrable. Yeah.
Okay.
Bluger was one of the Penguins' leading scorers over the first 2 or 3 weeks of the season. I don't know if you remember when like Malkin, and I don't think it was like Crosby, barely, and a bunch of nobodies, including Teddy Bluger, who, fun fact, his full name is Theodorus.
Theodore or what?
Theodorus.
What is that?
What do you mean?
Like, what are you saying? Like
that's his name.
How do you spell that?
Teo.
Mm-hmm.
Dors. Theodorus.
All right.
He's from Latvia.
Well, beautiful name. Okay, let's go to Minnesota. Nick Bonino had another big game on Saturday, a goal and a power play assist versus the Sharks. That brings him to 11 points in his last 7 games, playing with your boy, Zach Parise at even strength, but more importantly, on the top power play with Fiala, Kaprizov, Victor Raskin, Jared Spurgeon. Brian, I already brought up Luke Kunin earlier in the show as he scored goals in 3 straight games for Nashville. Who knew this Bonino for Kunin trade in the offseason would have so much fantasy relevance at this point in the season? I feel like we just shook our hands at this being like a nothing trade. But right now, how can Nick Bonino not be rosterable? I guess one reason is Minnesota doesn't play till Wednesday, so I'm not like rushing to grab him. But if you could get him and fit him in for Wednesday, Thursday, Saturday against the Blues, who I've mentioned aren't like a team that I'm so much expecting to be good at stopping the puck right now, especially down 2 defensemen, maybe Bonino is someone you want to grab to end your week next week.
Yeah, he is rosterable, to go back to the theme of this segment. And I'm really trying to build my brand in this segment, Elon, as someone who's open to new ideas, especially after you said, I don't want any of the guys we've already talked about. Bonino on that top power play has been making waves and earning a lot of people Tim's points. For anyone who's playing the Tim Hortons Hockey Challenge app, which I'm quite into. As our patrons know, we have a channel dedicated to picking and discussing our players on our Discord server. So if you want to get in over the last weeks of the season and tell us how much you love Nick Bonino for the coffees he's earned you, keepingkarlsson.com/patron.
And again, this is not a paid advertisement for Tim Hortons. Like, Brian just likes this game.
I just threw it in there. Yeah, I like it enough to get over the fact that I hate like doing this like hell corporate thing for this Canadian coffee chain. Like, I don't want to mention them. I don't want to give them free advertising, but I got to admit, they've got me with their stupid little game.
Correct me if I'm wrong. I don't even think you like coffee. Aren't you always like tired? Then like, why don't you drink coffee? And then you're like, I don't drink coffee.
I drink coffee a little, but I don't often drink their coffee.
You drink coffee when Nick Bonino scores a lot of points and he earns you free coffee from
I'm
Tim
actually
Hortons.
just hoarding the rewards points that I can use. I don't know if I ever have the intent to use them, but I like seeing my number go up.
Okay. Okay, let's probably finish off this segment here. I could mention like Alex Killorn. He's got 5 points his last 5 games after going pointless in 9. Like Tampa's weird with all of these injuries. Stamkos probably still out next week because he doesn't come off the LTIR until May 5th. But Tampa, like I mentioned with Detroit, on that final day of the season, it's only going to be, well, for people whose seasons end next week, it's going to be Tampa versus Detroit in the final game. So you might be wanting to look at an Alex Killorn playing with Taijo and Cirelli, like any of these guys, right? And then the top line has been point with Palat and Barre Boulet. So, and also Killorn has been on the top power play recently. So I don't know. Just want to throw him out there. He's probably rosterable, right? Just because you could get him on that Sunday at the very least.
I guess I would prefer Barry Boulet over him, who, by the way, has his first career goal.
I'm surprised, but okay, sure.
Well, I mean, Killorn, his time on ice is still still mid-6 deployment, and you said he's bumped up to play with Tyler Johnson and Anthony Cirelli, which is good, but it's not awesome. Neither of those guys have been reliable producers this year. And you mentioned that Killorn has seen some time on the top power play, which is great, but
so
he
has
has
Boulet, yeah.
Yeah, so is Barry Boulet, and Killorn has had 5 games there and hasn't made a lot of noise, just 1 power play point. Although 1 power play point every 5 games is actually that's fine. Like that's decent power play production, but it's not like they're just coming in waves.
Can't you say he's due? Shouldn't we just say that for the reason that he hasn't? No, I'm just kidding. Okay, yeah, I mean, but yeah, so someone to keep on your radar if you are looking at that last Sunday game. How about one more player who I just want to mention? I brought up Spencer Knight before playing his first career game. Another one was Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen over on Buffalo, who played on Friday versus Boston, and he actually pulled out the win for Buffalo over Boston. He stopped 40. He stopped, what did I write here? He definitely didn't stop 4 of 40. Then he wouldn't have won. So he probably stopped 36, I'd say. Stopped 36 of the 40 shots against him in that 6-4 win. Tokarski played for Buffalo today, and as we've discussed, did not do too well against Mika Zibanejad and the Rangers, which makes me wonder if next week Buffalo plays against the Rangers again on Tuesday, and I wonder if they try giving Ukko-Pekka another start. So Brian, very short term, obviously long term, I think we're generally excited about Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen. He's supposed to be a good goalie, but like, let's say you need a goalie for next Tuesday. Are you going to risk it and play Ukko-Pekka versus the Rangers after what the Rangers did to Buffalo today?
Who are my other choices, right? Like this is not, will I play him? If I'm desperate for a start, will I go for it? Sure.
Okay, let's say this. Okay, let me make it an easier question for you then. How about it's your first goalie game of the week. You're in a categories league with wins, save percentage, and goals against average. And it's like you could probably just not play him and hit your minimum goalie starts with your other goalies, or you can play Ukko-Pekka and go for a good game.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's a lot of elements here. I would look at my opponent's team, so look at my goalies, look at their goalies, see who's likely to win the week. I think if I'm playing conservative, no, I would not play Luukkonen. Hopefully it's not too much of a cop-out answer. However, if I just need to throw darts for my week in goalie stats and try and grab one, yeah, sure, why not? If I feel like my chances of winning the goalie categories are already, say, 40% or lower, I'll toss him in. He hasn't been great even in the AHL games he's played this year, in 888 and 14 games played with Rochester, although we've talked before about the nature of AHL numbers and how you shouldn't get too invested in them, because often that's where a goalie is fine-tuning their game and working on things and trying different stuff. So it's not to say he's been bad in the AHL, but it is to say that Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen has not had really much success as a pro in various parts of 3 seasons playing as a pro.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm with you that he would be someone that you take a swing on, but I wouldn't be expecting another win from him against the Rangers. But I guess you never know. It'll be interesting to see what Buffalo does, right? Ullmark is an unrestricted free agent. I don't know if people are aware. To me, Ullmark still feels kind of like a new goalie in the league, but no, he's a UFA. He could go anywhere next year, assuming he's healthy. Hopefully he'll be fine because he's been so good in the games he's played. He just seems to always get injured. Another Ranta candidate. But yeah, I wonder if Buffalo's going to have to make a big push to sign him, or if maybe they're going to just switch over to Ukko-Pekka and some other free agent that they signed. So that'll be fun to follow in the summer. All right, so Brian, let's end the show today by looking back on our draft from last week, and just maybe we could each go through our teams, go through Jeremy's team, and see who were the big hits and the big misses of the draft. So up to you. You could go first, or I could go first to go through my team, or you could go through your team.
Well, I'm gonna throw to you, but if anybody wants to check out our teams, we have a hyperlink to it, right?
I believe so. keepingkarlsson.com/draft. We'll link to this also in the show notes, so you could find it all there. But okay, so how about you said you'll go first?
No, I said you'll go first.
Okay, I'll go first. All right. So first of all, I am losing right now. So straight up, I've got only 290 points. Brian, you're in the lead right now with 316. Jeremy has 303. I do have more fantasy points per game than you, but hey, we'll see. Obviously, I needed to plan the schedule right. I will say that I drafted Connor McDavid, who's got 4 games to go, only gave me the 2. Anyways, this is excuses. Let's go through my team super quickly. So Colin Blackwell seems like he's been a miss. Kevin Fiala was good. Like I mentioned, Larkin is injured. Subban is injured. Also, Thomas Tatar is injured. This is the guy we didn't bring up this week, but the Habs, who've already had trouble scoring goals, might be without Tatar for a little bit. I'll say, Brian, if I'm going to highlight one player who I think has been a nice hit for me and that people should look at if he's still somehow available, I remember you and Jeremy were sort of like, well, you were actually a little bit like skeptical of this pick. Jeremy was kind of behind me. Alex Goligoski continues to produce. He had 2 assists for Arizona in that game against LA yesterday. He's now got 4 points in his last 4 games, or no, 6 points in his last 6 games. You keep going back, you keep seeing points for Alex Goligoski. So, we've talked about a lot of rosterable quote unquote players this week, but I think if Goligoski's out there, he's probably better than all the defensemen that we've brought up. So he's really good. But overall, not looking good for me with all of these injuries. Matt Dumba has been a big nothing over on Minnesota. I thought that maybe he'd be similar to Spurgeon, who you took, but no, Spurgeon is definitely the better option there. But if I lose, I'm just going to blame it on Larkin, Tatar, and Subban all being out for the season.
Okay, so was this just an opportunity? Like, do we not even really need to go into the rosters? Is this just a chance for you to explain why you're not going to win this pool?
No, I don't know if there's any interest. This was my opportunity to tell people that Alex Goligoski is really good and people should go grab him. So I don't know if there's like a specific player in your team that you're like regretting having added. I said Colin Blackwell was a miss, which I don't get. And then Dave actually talked about him on the stream scheme this week, which I would definitely recommend checking out. And he also was like, what's with this guy? He like is playing with Panarin and he's doing well. Then we talk about him. Then all of a sudden he doesn't do well anymore, even though he's still playing with Panarin. Today, the Rangers scored 6 goals against the Buffalo Sabres. Blackwell's still playing on that Panarin line and yet no points. So I don't know.
He's like Jesse Puljujarvi.
I guess, but Puljujarvi is actually getting points recently. But yeah, he's worse. He's the poor man's Jesse Puljujarvi, which is not
pretty poor.
Yeah, it's not great.
Yeah, I guess I'm looking at my roster. Kevin LeBanc continues to do nothing despite decent deployment too. So he's my Colin Blackwell, except with better pedigree and previous actual results in his career. So Kevin LeBanc continues to let me down. I don't know. I'm in first, Elon, so I'm pretty happy with all my guys. I definitely would have bet money that Nikita Gusev playing with Barkov was going to do better than Sam Bennett or even Anthony Duclair playing with Jonathan Huberdeau. And that hasn't true. Jeremy, by the way, has Barkov and Duclair. So he's got the top 2 Panthers lines covered, and that's helping him stay ahead of you and in second place and still have hope of chasing me. But yeah, I think looking through everybody's picks, I'm not seeing any big surprises. I guess Mike Riley has managed to stay relevant, even though Matt Grzelcyk did come back almost right away after we made the draft, and Jeremy was disappointed and ended up hoping that Grzelcyk would stay out and Mike Riley would get points. Grzelcyk came back, but Mike Riley has still been pretty good. A couple shots a game, couple assists, a little hitting, a little blocking, so not too shabby.
By the way, Shams is saying in the chat that Blackwell got hurt late in the game. So if anyone was still holding out hope for Blackwell, maybe that could be the final straw. Brian, I'll say a couple strong picks on your team that I'm be curious if you were expecting them to go as well as they did. Sam Reinhart had himself a huge week, right? He had a hat trick versus the Bruins in that 6-4 win where Ukko-Pekka got his first career win, and then another 1 goal, 1 assist today in the loss to the Rangers. So Sam Reinhart definitely has come through for you. And then also Chandler Stevenson, man, this guy has changed his whole narrative. Like going into next season, I wonder how high people are going to be drafting this guy. Because yeah, he's in like the same, like we were talking about other players with good deployment that aren't doing anything, whatever. Like Chandler Stevenson's in this great deployment with Stone and Pacioretty. I feel like I've said this a bunch of times. I'm just repeating myself. But like this year, he's finally doing something with it. He had a huge 2-goal, 1-assist game versus Anaheim. And Vegas has a solid schedule next week. They go Wednesday, Friday, Saturday. So you don't have to, I guess if you're in a shallow league, Stevenson somehow still available, maybe you could try to wait. But he's just like been money lately, found money for anyone who's picked him up out of free agency because he had that cold streak. And right now I would definitely be happy to have him. So good pick on you there, Brian. And also, yeah, you grabbed Rasmus Dahlin.
Yeah, I was going to mention
yeah.
he continues having like a small renaissance over the last week. 3 points in his last 4 games. Still, as I said last week, still not shooting. Fewer than 2 shots per game. He actually has as many hits as he has shots over the last week for Dahlin. And I wish that weren't true. I wish he was shooting more often, but I will take the points and run. So it's just nice to see Dahlin on the score sheet like every other night for the last little while after spending most of the season pretty much banished from it.
I guess another reason I could point out for why I'm losing, and this is totally my fault, but Dustin Tokarski hit me with a -2 almost tonight. And Jake Ettinger had that terrible game where he came in after Khudobin got pulled against Detroit of all teams and dropped a -2.5 on me. So definitely have not been getting, I should just pick no goalies. I should have just picked goalies not even in the league, and I would be doing better than I'd be doing now with the goalie pick. So that's what you get with goalies. I guess I should have used one of a higher percent rostered band to grab my goalies from. Okay, so Brian, this has been fun chatting some fantasy with you. For a lot of people, this is going to be the last show before the end of their fantasy season. But regardless, we're still going to be back next week with more content. Actually, I believe we've got some fun stuff planned. We've got a potential.
We always wait till the very end of the episode to drop the most exciting news. Like we have our Keeping Karlsson Ultimate Playoff Pool gearing up. Oh man,
we got so much to talk about.
We should have mentioned this an hour and a half ago. Why we always do this?
So less competition for the people who made it all the way to the end. Don't worry about it. We're not making a lot of money off of this, Brian. So fewer people sign up for the playoff pool. It'll be a more fun, cozy group. But for you diehards who made it to the end of the show, yeah, get in on this. So by the way, a couple announcements. First of all, what I was about to say is we might next week be dropping a show of a cupful tier 1 reunion show, Survivor style, where John Newhold will be hosting. We'll be getting fresh reactions, I guess, from Ben or Dustin, who will be the brand new winner. And then also we'll try to get as many of the other tier 1 participants as possible to come in, and John will ask them some questions about how the season went. So that should be a lot of fun. That'll be like a bonus episode, I think. And then, the big announcements, like you said, first of all, I guess to lead into the playoff pool, we'll say that this is the moment now where if you're a patron of Keeping Karlsson, feel free to decrease your pledge amount and still you're going to get all of our perks. Brian, actually, we need to remember to do this tonight. Make it to do that. We need to update our Patreon so that people don't get locked out of Discord when they do decrease. But
gosh, yeah. Hopefully we do that without issue. I also want to do the flip side, which is that if you're not a patron of Keeping Karlsson, it's just $1 a month. So that would be the proactive choice you could make instead. Well, I guess they're both proactive choices, but they're two sides of the same coin. $1 patronage. Now that we're out of pretty much the fantasy playoffs, the fantasy season is just about done. It's wound down, and you can get all the perks that we normally offer our patrons, including participation on our Discord server and access to show notes and the bonus monthly Patreoncast episode. And you can join our amazing, like the brilliant Keeping Karlsson Ultimate Playoff Pool format that Ben, Burnett, and you and like that we all sort of brainstormed last season, but Ben gets top billing on credits for it by just joining us for $1 a month.
Yeah, it's going to be a really fun playoff pool. I mentioned it last week really quickly. Unlimited people can sign up, and there's going to be drafts. We're going to be doing slow drafts, which everyone loves drafting, right? And you're only going to be drafting for the first round of the playoffs. And then all you have to do is rank high enough to not get eliminated in that first round in your league. And then we'll just reshuffle the deck, and you'll just keep drafting potentially if you keep surviving all the way till the end, where there'll be one ultimate winner. We'll have one final round of drafts for the final round of the playoffs. So yeah, that's going to be a lot of fun. And so if you're a patron, just pay attention to your email, right? Because we're going to be sending a notification to all patrons very soon of how to sign up for the playoff pool. And again, you could just decrease your patronage or sign up for any amount, $1 a month, and we'll give you everything we can to try to keep you with us for the summer. We've got a lot of stuff planned for the summer, right? So Brian and I aren't taking time off, even though the fantasy season is coming to the end. We are focused on keeping you sharp and ready to be good at fantasy all season long. But with that, Brian, I guess we're ready to cue that outro music. And why don't you go ahead and read us the credits?
All right. This episode of the Keeping Karlsson Fantasy Hockey Podcast was presented by Dobber Hockey and powered by our patrons. Logo art by BrandonWeeb.com. Outro music from Pat Roach. This episode was researched with help from Dobber Hockey, Frozen Pool, Dobber Prospects, Natural Stat Trick, Evolving Hockey, Cap Friendly, HockeyGoalies.org, Hockey Reference, Hockey Viz, Hockey Database, Elite Prospects, NBC Sports Edge, and Yahoo. Oh, and Fantrax.
Of course, sure. Yeah, great job as always, Brian. And thanks so much to all those resources that helped you prep the show. Thanks everyone for listening. I didn't mention you can follow us on Twitter at Keeping Karlsson. We'd love a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. But with that, Brian, I'm looking forward to talking to you next week. Oh, also, by the way, a couple more short shifts. I think it's going to be the season finale of short shifts coming this Thursday. So yeah, the stuff keeps coming. We hope people will like it. And I'm looking forward to all of it.
That reminds me, Elon, sorry to make you loop the outro music again, but for the first time ever, we have a Twitch channel where I streamed some Friday night play from the Keeping Karlsson patron EASHL team. It's over at twitch.tv/Keeping Karlsson. There's like no schedule or anything. It's kind of haphazard, but if you want to watch us play, you can like and subscribe over at twitch.tv/Keeping Karlsson.
Why don't you throw that in the show notes? Because I don't know if people are going to remember that, but yeah, you'll find all the links to all the stuff we're talking about in the show notes, including the Twitch where you can watch Brian play Chell with the patrons. I definitely need to check that out myself. Okay, so I'm going to say goodbye. So Brian, it was great talking to you.
Yeah, and remember, our patron group and Discord server and playoff pool and fantasy hockey are all for everyone.
Yeah.
I wish that face could go somehow on the show itself.
I mean, it's part of the YouTube. So Brian, I lost.
Yeah. How are you feeling?
I mean, my team has 281 points. So for anyone in Cupful, that's like a good week. That's a
very good week.
That wins most weeks. Not to throw any shade on Dustin or Marcus, but if I was playing one of them, would it be a massacre? Right. And they're in the other semifinals.
Right. So the winner in that matchup has 227 points and change.
Yeah. But obviously Dustin earned it by coming first, even though I had more regular season points. But I'm happy for them. And honestly, actually, I feel
they finished below like a lot of consolation teams, both of them.
The
first and fourth seed, had like the 10th and 12th best weeks in tier 1.
Yeah. So what can I do? Like I did the best I can. I don't think I could have done, like I could have obviously made little changes like this week. Obviously, if I could have read the future, I added Matt Murray yesterday and then he got injured mid-game. That was a bummer. I could have added some other goalie that got me more points, but I lost now by, it looks like 14 points to Ben. So
yeah,
I think that I just have to be like, damn, I the only thing I'll blame it on is if Kevin Fiala doesn't get suspended that week, and or if Yahoo doesn't like lets you stash players, and I could have beaten, because I had a matchup against Dustin in week 2. If I would have beaten Dustin, I would have ranked first overall, which means I'd be the one playing. Well, I don't know, someone else other than
maybe
Ben.
You should have dropped Fiala.
Yeah, well, I mean, that would have been maybe not a smart move. Also, though I have considered it at times. What if I had done that? Because I'm sure at the time there's probably some free agent. If I really want to go back and play revisionist history, like who was the guy who was out? Maybe JVR was out there at the time, and I could have like swapped for him. Anyway. Theoretically, I could have had some better luck, but at the same time, I think that it's just one of these things when you're playing head to head, you could have a great season, but if someone else has a better week than you, what can you do? So, and also Ben and Dustin are both awesome, and I think they'll both make really cool Cupful Ultimate Champions for the next year. So I definitely wish them both the best of luck.
They'll be great ambassadors of the Cupful.
Yeah, exactly. As Max has been this year. So Max's reign is coming to an end, and it's going to be Ben or Marcus, and I'm very excited for them. I wish it was me. I'm not going to lie, but one day. Okay. So Ben is here. Got to beat the best to win, Elon. I know Ben's team, man. Who does Ben have anyways? Why is his team so good? I mean, I already know, but let's shout out some of these players.
A lot of Flyers.
Yeah, he was smart. Well, Flyers had a good schedule this week. Ben really played the schedule. I'm pretty sure he has more games played overall than me. He's had,
I think it's pretty close.
63 to 62. So yeah, he's just straight up had better players. Like
Brian Rust had a huge week.
Brian Rust, yeah.
After being very quiet for a long time.
Just like you look at all of his players, they all have like
Krejci, 3 goals on 7 shots for David Krejci this week.
He doesn't have one player who didn't have any points, and he's got like multiple players that had like at least 3 points, like Couturier, JVR, Brian Rust, Buchnevich, Dougie Hamilton.
Shesterkin had a bad week. Shesterkin only had fewer than 2 points, but everyone else, Nedeljkovic, like playing that as many starts as he did, like playing 3 in a row when he's like never even played 2 in a row, gathered 21 points that way.
Yeah, well, he just added Nedeljkovic today, actually. So that was he thought that he had it in the bag.
Are you sure? Because it says, oh, sorry. Yeah. I'm looking at the wrong page.
Oh, yeah. I definitely didn't have good luck with goalies. I should really blame you about this, Brian, because
why?
I'm going to blame you because you got in my head about how Jonathan Bernier is good. And then I had him for the Monday game when he gave me a negative 5.2 to start the week. And
I was over Bernier because he did that to me last week. So if you had asked me again, it's too bad you didn't hold him for his 14-point performance.
I know.
If you didn't have the -5 from Bernier, if you streamed him on the 24th instead of the 20th, you would have won.
Yeah. The thing is, it was like, I didn't even want Bernier, but he was I had added him like a while ago for a stream, and then he got injured. So he was in my IR anyways. And so then I was just like, oh, and he was playing Monday against Dallas. And I was like, why not get this one game from Bernier? The plan was to drop him after that regardless. I didn't expect him to drop a negative 5.2.
I mean, he didn't have negatives all season long until the playoffs for you and I.
Yeah, he had negative one time against Nashville after we mentioned him on the show saying he's good. So Bernier's just
pretty much the moment I said Bernier's good, Bernier decided to pack it in, which is maybe his personal revenge on me for doubting him all these years and being like, oh, you believe in me now? Okay.
Yeah. I hate
Watch this. I'll teach you to believe in me.
The worst, Jonathan Bernier. Streamed in Jake Allen to get a couple games on Monday and Wednesday, and he just like didn't do that well. Edmonton and Calgary blew him up. That was too bad. All right. Anyway, so Brian, you and I are both a couple losers, and we're in it together. It's almost fun. At least I could be in the same boat as you, because maybe it would be a weird dynamic if I was a champion and you were not, and then it would be kind of like, oh, should we like treat each other differently now? So at least now we know that we can like sort of still maintain our friendship how it is.
So I wasn't going to change anything, but it looks like you were ready to get up.
I would have been expecting
your high horse.
Yeah, I was expecting you to change and like talk to me with like a bit more reverence as like a couple ultimate champion. Well, now
I mean, sorry. The actual answer is I have maximum reverence for you already.
Okay. Yeah. All right. This is fun. Bye, everybody.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah. Hope you enjoyed it.
You're handling this very well, Elon.
It's okay. We're gonna hopefully
give up Friday, right? You were lower earlier in the week.
I don't know. I think there's something about losing with 281 couple points where it's like, what am I supposed to do with this? Like, I lost to the like a most amazing team. Ben has 294 points.
The only team that would have beat you. Yeah.
Yeah. Ben's great. But Dustin's also good. I wouldn't, by the way, even though Dustin had a weak WEAK week this week, I think that he is still a very strong competition because he's got a lot of players that could potentially come out of the IR just in time to do some damage on Ben. He's got Sagan and Malkin and Bergeron currently in his IR who missed a game. So he's just going to be able to drop 3 guys, potentially bring in all 3. I don't know what's the status on Malkin, but he's skating apparently. So Dustin he knows what he's doing, and I have a feeling it's going to be a closer matchup than you might think from the scores this week. So should be very exciting.
Shout out to no one's still listening anymore, but Brandon and Kyle are going to the finals in my tier. The first seed is out. The first seed has been upset by the 5th seed.
Wait a second. Sorry, who's going to the finals in your tier?
Brandon Weeb and Kyle.
So not Matt.
Not Matt. So
oh my God.
Matt was the
so mad.
Matt was the U. He had 261 points. He lost to Brandon, who had 293. And the other 2 teams in the finals did not, were both less than Matt's total.
Talking to Matt, that one time when I talked to him for the stat attack, he wanted this so badly. He built such a good team. He's had such a strong season.
I was actually really the consolation for me losing was that Matt was going to be gone next year. I don't know. So we'll see if he's still in my division.
Matt, if you're listening, don't rage quit the cupful, please. Tier 2 is fun. It's you have some fun new people.
Clearly it's hard. To play with. I mean, Mike. So the number 1 seed was 11-1 this season. And had the worst week of the 4 finalists.
That's wild. The 2 teams with the buys lost. You'd think that the buys has to be an advantage, but I guess
they had a little more time to prepare.
Crazy. Yeah, I had a buy versus Ben. Not that helped very much. I had all week to have Jonathan Bernier wait on my roster to drop a -5 on me on day 1. So I made good use of my buy.
Oh, wow. Fantasy hockey is a
tough game. But Brian, we've got to let me make this move right now for us. I think that we've decided we're going to drop Colin Black. I guess I can do this off the air. So maybe I'll say goodbye to everyone. I'm going to drop Blackwell for Athens CU right now. And then we'll figure out our goalies on Monday.
What happened? Kyle
Okay.
had Reinhardt and Cologne.
So I'm going to say bye. I'm going to close the show. So bye, everybody.
Oh, yeah. Pacioretty. Acquisition of the year.
Okay, it's over.
Mike